Today's episode is brought to you by Instructional Design Institute. If you're looking to learn more about the instructional design field and how to make your courses even better, this is the resource for you. Within the Institute, there are courses designed to teach you new skills right away, along with support from a community to nerd out with. You also receive coaching from me on anything instructional design related. You can learn more by Googling Instructional Design Institute or go to drlukehobson.com. Sign up today for your free trial. And now to the show. Hey folks, and welcome on in to another episode of the podcast. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson. I'm an instructional designer at MIT, a blogger, a podcaster, YouTuber, and the founder of Instructional Design Institute. My purpose is to help you make the online learning experience more meaningful for you and for your students. And you can find all my information over at drlukehobson.com. The instructional design community has been talking about one question for the last year or so. Do you need an instructional design degree to be an instructional designer? It's a fantastic question since most of us accidentally fell into the ID field. To quote the guest coming on the show today, no one ever grows up wanting to become an instructional designer. So, how do you know if a degree is right for you and for your career? The thing is that it's a rather complicated answer, and it all depends upon the person, the ultimate goal, their prior experience, and more. But I want you to hear from two expert opinions on the matter, with one coming from a stance, but a degree isn't necessary, and one coming from the stance, but a degree is recommended. Now, once again, there isn't a simple answer to this question, and both guests actually acknowledge this in their episodes. It's why I want you to hear from two people I deeply respect in our field, and then you can make the right decision for you. These two experts are Tim Slade, the founder of eLearning Designers Academy and the author of the wildly popular The eLearning Designer's Handbook, and Dr. Carl Kopp, professor at Bloomsburg University, co-founder of Enterprise Game Stack, and the author of several books in instructional design and learning. So this is a two-part episode to hear both perspectives, with the second half being released later on this month. On today's episode, though, we'll hear from Tim about his ID journey, his thoughts around degrees, and what employers are looking for in an instructional designer. He also talks about strategies for aspiring instructional designers on how to maneuver around the degree qualification topic. It's a really interesting idea that he had, and I love that he talked about it on this episode. In this episode, it's full of real examples and life lessons that I can't wait for you to listen to. So let's get this episode started. Here is the one and only Tim Slade. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I've been looking for this all day. As I was telling you before recording, I cannot wait to nerd out with you and talk about this entire topic about degrees, which is something that we constantly keep on hearing about on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook and everything else. So cannot wait to dive into all of that with you today. But before I get ahead of myself, Tim, for the folks at home, can you just please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, well, I'm Tim Slade. I've been working as a e-learning designer and an instructional designer for a little over 10 years now. And before I started my own business and before I started the eLearning Designers Academy and community, I worked in several different corporate organizations doing learning and development, and then eventually moved into freelancing, doing custom e-learning development. And so when I'm not helping my clients develop amazing e-learning, I'm mentoring and helping others do that for themselves.
Absolutely. And you are everywhere.
Yeah.
Literally, anytime I go online, it says all of a sudden there is Tim giving a speech. He's at a conference. He's making a new YouTube video. Like, you are everywhere right now. So I don't know how you're doing it, but
I'm tired.
You're like, I'm doing this through coffee
Yeah.
and willpower. But
Yeah.
hey, you're doing an absolute amazing job with everything.
Thank you.
So for sure, hats off
Yeah.
to you.
Thank you.
So where I want to start, Tim, with this entire conversation is just around instructional design in general,
Mhm.
because our field is booming like never before. And I remember I watched one of your videos on YouTube, and you actually said a line that really stuck with me. And you talked about how no one ever dreamed of becoming an instructional designer or going into e-learning for a living.
Mhm.
That was never a goal. How did you become an instructional designer in the first place?
Yeah, so I think for like a lot of folks, I fell into it by accident. So I don't have a background in e-learning or instructional design or education or adult learning theory. I have a degree in criminal justice, and I spent a huge portion of my career working in retail loss prevention, catching shoplifters. And then one day, my boss said, "Hey, you're really good at catching shoplifters. There's a training coordinator position at the corporate office on the loss prevention team to train others on how to catch shoplifters." And so I took the job thinking it's going to advance my loss prevention career. And that's when I got exposed to e learning and instructional design. And it was through that process I realized I kind of tapped into a talent that I didn't know was there. And I fell in love with it. And the rest was kind of history. So, yeah, totally by accident.
Which is pretty much the sentiment of like every instructional designer I know of. Everyone.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is nobody knows that when you feel that's where I think a lot of people in our industry struggle from imposter syndrome because nobody realizes that everyone else fell into it by accident, and that if you do have a degree in instructional design or adult learning theory or any of that, you're actually in the minority. Most
Mhm.
people don't have a background in the stuff that we do.
No, not at all. And the only reason why I knew about this field is because I worked at a university as an academic advisor and I met instructional designers.
Hmm.
And when I first heard about their title, I was like, what do you do? I was like,
Yeah.
you get paid to do what? And then when I got to hear more about it, I was like, wow, that's really cool. Like you're actually
Hmm.
designing this entire piece of knowledge for somebody from the entire process from start to finish, which is something that did you ever take online courses growing up?
Yeah, it's interesting. I oftentimes think about that, and I have a hard time remembering what my perception was of things like e-learning or training before I got into it. And I guess it never occurred to me that there was somebody somewhere in the back end creating that content.
Right?
And
Like someone has to be making it.
and so when I like you, when I found out that there was a job in this, I thought, oh, this is a job that people do. How cool is that? And so it's interesting now when I go get a haircut, when they always well, when I used to get haircuts because I haven't gotten a haircut. Well, I've cut my own hair in the last year, but when you used to go to places to get haircuts, the question I always hate answering when I'm getting haircuts, they go, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And I've always struggled with answering that because I don't know how to describe it. Because if you say e-learning or instructional design, they look at you weird. And so now what I say is, I say, when you start your job, you started your job here, and you had to sit behind a computer and watch like 30 minutes of, not touching your coworkers inappropriately. Like, I create that. Uh, and then they always give me a really nasty look because then I'm the reason, I'm the cause of their frustration having to sit through those courses. But then I try to say, well, I create the good ones. You just haven't experienced that yet.
Exactly. There
Yeah,
is good e-learning. I
yeah,
swear. It
yeah,
can be
yeah.
done. I was having a conversation with someone the other day and they asked me, and I did say instructional design. And I was baffled when they're like, oh, I know what that is. And I was just like, you do? Like, that was the
Hmm.
first times. And then she actually said what it is I do. Ish. Like,
Yep.
close enough as one could say without actually being an instructional designer. So,
Hmm.
so the field is changing. The world is changing. Clearly, that now we're hearing some of those things, which has been very different. But that leads me into just going into seeing more about job postings for instructional design. And
Hmm.
as we are seeing, there are so many that are coming out constantly in every single job website, and they're really confusing. You look at
Hmm.
one, you look at another one, you're like, these really aren't similar. Like how is this all coming into play? So in your opinion, why are job postings right now just like all over the place when it comes to qualifications for designers?
Yeah, I think One of the things that's been changing in our industry, specifically in the way that organizations hire instructional designers, is that the phrase or the title instructional designer means many different things to many different organizations. And there used to be a time back 10, 15 years ago that an instructional designer was a very specific thing. You created content. And if you wanted to create an e-learning course, you had to pass it off to somebody who had expensive skills and could code and develop, an e-learning course. But nowadays, the tools that we use, like Storyline or Rise or Adobe Captivate, whatever tool you might be using, they've become so much easier and accessible for more and more people to be able to use. And so I think a lot of organizations have started to expand their expectation in terms of what it means to be an instructional designer. So, yeah, you might be creating content, but now you're also going to be doing needs analysis and project management and stakeholder management and e-learning development and graphic design. And if you're lucky, you're like the person who can fix the copying machine. And all of these things get lumped in to what these employers want. And the way I describe it is employers want T-shaped employees. And it's T-shaped is you have really broad capability, but a deep expertise as well. And that's very challenging for a lot of folks in our industry to be not just, it's one thing to say you have to be good at it all, but even just being capable at it all is a big challenge for a lot of folks. And I think it's just organizations are expecting more and more from what it means to be an instructional designer.
Absolutely agreed with literally everything you just said. One of the things that has really surprised me about my role and how it's kind of morphed into everything is that because I'm the one who knows about the content better than anyone else, because I designed the course for the organization. Well, then when somebody is needed to give a webinar or a presentation or a demo or anything like that, like I have somehow become the demo guy. Like I found myself because they're like, you have a microphone and you built the course. Want to talk about it? And it's like,
Sure.
Not at all anywhere in my job description, but by all means, if you want me to, then yeah.
I can't tell you how many times in my career I was, because I developed e-learning, which is it's my belief that e-learning is a tool for visual communications and interactivity. People go, well, if you can do that, well, here, help me design my presentation, make this look pretty, or design this graphic. Like there's all these peripheral skills that get lumped onto you because you do this one thing. I personally love that because it gives variety to what I do every day. But I know for a lot of people that's a struggle, especially those people who are those instructional design purists.
Absolutely. Now, with all of those trends that you were just talking about, have you noticed them in one sector over another of either corporate, nonprofit, government, higher ed, anything like that?
Yeah, when you talk about government and higher ed, that's kind of my blind spot. I don't know a lot. I mean, I worked in a government job for 13 months, and it was the worst 13 months of my life. So most of my background's in corporate. And I think in general, not just with instructional design, but in general with corporate jobs, job descriptions are a formality. And so however that organization evolves and grows and raises the bar, you have to grow and raise the bar and adapt to it as well. But I think it's definitely true in the corporate environment more than anywhere else, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, in higher ed, I can speak to that for sure. And it is mind boggling what I am seeing for different postings. I had someone send me a job posting the other day, and they wanted a PhD in instructional design. The starting pay was $40K a year. I was like, yeah, that's not how that works. If you, where you can then go and find another instructional design higher ed job that doesn't need a PhD, just a bachelor's is fine. And then they obviously already pay more than that.
Well, I think in the private sector, in the corporate America world, it's the opposite. I don't think they might list that they want you to have a bachelor's degree or master's degree, but that's a formality. I don't think they really care anymore about that. I have a degree in criminal justice, and that's never been, it's just never been an issue that I don't have a formal background in education. I just don't think they care in the private sector. They're more interested in your skills. Like, what can you offer them right now? Whether you have 10 years or 2 years of experience or a PhD or, a high school diploma.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Mhm.
So for instructional design degrees, I've seen a few of them. And I don't have one either. I have my background is actually I have a bachelor's in graphic design,
No,
master's in marketing, and then I went eventually and I got my doctorate in education because I was like, I like higher education. I'm going to be here. Let's just go and do the thing.
sure.
So I did the thing. But when looking at specifically instructional design degrees, they vary. I am seeing a wide variety of things. And I know that from listening to one of your videos, you talked about how for some of the degrees, they are certainly lacking specific skill sets that are obviously like practical applications and helpful things that you really would need. And just overall, in your opinion, when it comes to their curriculum, just like what are they missing that really like they really need to focus on and improve on?
Yeah, I mean, the number one complaint I hear from people when they go and, there's first, I guess we should preface it by saying if you're going back to school to get a degree in in learning, instructional design, instructional technology, more power to you. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. The problem, because there's people who are really passionate about that, and
Fair
that's
enough.
great.
Fair,
Yeah,
fair enough.
trust me, they've blasted me on LinkedIn when I say you don't need a degree.
Sure.
But the biggest complaint I hear from people when they go back to school and they spend all this money and then they go try to find a job, especially in corporate America, they get smacked in the face with realizing, oh, all that theory I learned in my degree program only accounts for this much of my job. There's the stakeholder management and the project management and the doing needs analysis and assessments and just being able to create a beautiful e-learn. I mean, all of those things they don't teach you. You might get exposure to some of those tools. You might talk about it conceptually, but it's not, a major part of the curriculum. And when I wrote my book, the e-learning designer's handbook, that was the gap that I wanted to fill for people is that you can know the theory inside and out, but if you can't manage a project or manage the expectations of a stakeholder, you're going to fall on your face really quickly in the private sector. And so I think a lot of degree programs, and this is just based off of what I've seen. I have no real evidence for it besides my personal experience. I think a lot of degree programs have started to realize this. And so the other day, like literally yesterday, I got this really amazing message from a PhD, a professor. I can't remember which university she was from, but they were using my book to teach their e-learning and instructional design program, which just blew my mind away.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, and
Cool.
I had another program out of Toronto. They invited me to speak to talk about the practical nature of our jobs in the real world. So I think they realize that that's a gap for them, and they're trying to figure out the best way to fill that in a academic environment.
Oh, it's awesome to hear. I know, but I've certainly same thing. I've seen some of them where I'm like, okay, you're stepping up. Okay, like this is great. Where other times, like you were saying,
Hmm.
there are courses on 9 learning theories, and you're like, cool, that's a small part of what it is that we do.
Yeah.
I mean, like every time I go on LinkedIn or Facebook, I'll see a comment that will talk about like, wait, how much is it of your job you actually work with SMEs? Like quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge deal of how we're able to influence, negotiate, persuade those human
Hmm.
skills that you don't learn about in school, but
Nope.
you need to. That is
Yeah.
an essential part of what it is that we do. So I don't want to exclude the folks who they are passionate about education. They want to get a degree. Their mind is set. That's what they are going to do. What should they be looking for specifically within a degree program that you would advise to say like, okay, this would actually fit your needs?
That's a good question. I guess my biggest thing would be uh, Kara North. I don't know if you know who she is. Kara North just did a post literally this morning, I think, on LinkedIn or Twitter, talking about what to look for in a degree program. And some of the things she mentioned that I really liked. And she has a background in academia, specifically on the instructional design side. And she talks a lot about making sure you go and look at reviews of that professor and reviews of the program, and maybe if you can find out what kind of jobs graduates earned as a result of that, kind of that stuff. But the big thing I think I would look for is anything that gets into the nitty gritty practical nature of doing the job. We talk about this all the time in instructional designs. We talk about not just knowing things, about being able to do things for our learners. That's what we want to create training, is to help our learners do things in their jobs. Same thing with a degree program. You want to hopefully graduate being able to do something with all that theory. So I would be looking for how is that program going to help you and support you in applying all that theory and that knowledge in a practical sense.
Now, what are your thoughts then on not full blown degrees, but like certificates, badges, and smaller chunks of learning? What do you think about those?
Yeah, I go back and forth on this all the time. So I think it's great that you went and earned a certificate or a badge or you went and did something. But at the end of the day, if it didn't help you be able to do something better, then it's kind of worthless. And so I wear I used to, in a previous job, I used to hire instructional designers and e-learning developers when I worked as a director of learning at GoDaddy. And, I said this earlier and I'll probably repeat it during our podcast here, but in the corporate world, at least, people want to hire for what you can do right now. So if you go say, take a certificate program on Storyline, you better be able to use Storyline after you complete that program. Otherwise, that badge really means nothing. And I know this isn't the topic of our podcast here today, but that's part of the reason why portfolios are becoming so much more prominent in the hiring process, because anyone can say on their resume that they can use Storyline. It doesn't prove that you can do the things that you can say you can do. So they're great, that's fine, but at the end of the day, people still want to see evidence that you can do these things. So it has to be backed up with ability.
Well, even though it's not the topic of the conversation, portfolios are obviously huge. And you know what? Hey, let's just go into that then. So, without a degree, we're not going to go for that one. We're not going down that road. Instead, I want to focus. I want to make a portfolio. What is the best way to really showcase and to capitalize on my skill set and to really demonstrate what I've learned in a portfolio?
Yeah, one of the things I've always strongly believed is that one of the easiest ways that you can tell whether or not somebody is passionate about a thing that they do is whether or not they spend any amount of their free time doing that thing. If you go to work every day and after you clock out at the end of the day, you don't think about, in this example, let's talk about e-learning. If you don't think about it, if it's not bouncing around in your mind in any capacity until the next day, then you really have to ask yourself how passionate you are about it. So the reason why I mention that is, for me, the way I went about building my portfolio is I designed and built e-learning during my free time. I'd open up Storyline and go, okay, today I'm gonna build a course on, pick a topic. I literally on my portfolio have a course on how to cook a turkey, and that's because I stayed home one year for Thanksgiving and I was bored. And now it's a part of my portfolio. And so for me, the best way to build a portfolio is by, creating content and putting it out there. It's as simple as that, because I think a lot of people get hung up on, I need to get examples from my job or a client. The truth is, most of the work that you do for at work or for a client isn't portfolio worthy, because it's boring topics, and clients and stakeholders have a special way of ruining your courses through their edits. So I'm a big proponent of practicing your skill, when during your nights and weekends, when you have full creative freedom.
That's when you know, but you really found like your purpose and your
Hmm.
passion. Because when you are obsessed with that, you can't shut it off.
Yep,
You know, and
exactly.
like the first time I learned about how to do course mapping, and I
Hmm.
had all these different stickies and whiteboard, and I just had like, it was one of those types of scenes that must have been out of like, a horror movie of like the police trying to like investigate and like tie it all in together, because
Hmm.
I had strings going to things and I'm moving around these different notes, and I was just like, all right, I'm like, how is this going to impact learning if we do this piece here? And that was where I was like, okay, I think I found a job I can hang out with for a while,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
this is just, I've never had that experience before. Where I was
Yep.
like, I'm getting paid to do this. This is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I think the people who are most passionate are the one, like, to your point, they obsess over improving their craft. And I've managed people who didn't obsess over it, and it reflected in their work, and it reflected in their job satisfaction. And it's unfortunate, not only for me as a manager to have to manage somebody like that, but it's also unfortunate that for them, because I want those people to figure out, well, what is it that you're obsessed about? Go do that. And people find that at different stages in their lives, but that's super important.
Oh, of course. And it obviously impacts everything from the learning experience standpoint too. If you're not this crazy hyper proactive, like I guarantee with the training, the workshop, the course, whatever it is you're designing, it's not going to be as good as you can make it.
Right.
because you don't
Yep.
care as much, unfortunately. Just,
Yep.
the truth. And that should never happen because that's what we do. We should be
Exactly.
making awesome quality content. That's kind of the whole nature of things.
Yep.
So let's say that you are an inspiring instructional designer and you are looking to apply for an ID position, and it mentions about having a degree of a job posting. How do you get around this hurdle when it comes to different types of like resume filters, ATS systems, and things of that nature to finally bypass the robot and to get your resume or your CV into the hands of a human being?
Yeah, it's definitely a game that you have to play. The hardest, I think, the hardest part of any job seeking process is getting past the recruiter. Once you're in the room with the hiring manager, you don't have to worry about the resume, you don't have to worry about the degree, because it becomes really about making that person like you. And so for me, the first thing I always tell people, because I've been on the side of hiring, is that if a job description says you need to have X amount of years of experience or a degree or whatever the case might be, just ignore it. If you look at the description and you still feel like it's something you would be a good fit for, apply for it anyways, because most frequently those requirements are just standard requirements that HR puts on them. And like I said, I have a degree in criminal justice. I have applied and been hired for countless jobs that wanted degrees in education, and it's because I've allowed my skills to compensate for that. So for me, if you're really serious about landing a job, build a portfolio, put a link to that portfolio on your resume. And yes, of course, there's those ATS systems that scan your resume. Make sure you put in those good keywords that align with that job description. You just got to get past that recruiter. Once you're past the recruiter, you're golden. And recruiters, that's the other thing. I think people think recruiters don't have any idea what it is that they're actually interviewing for. Recruiters don't know what instructional design is. They're just listening to make sure you sound like a competent person that might be a good fit within that company's culture, and you meet certain requirements, that you're saying the right things and you sound like somebody that they might want to pass off to the hiring manager. So the recruiter part is just playing the game. Once you're past that, then it's just making that hiring manager like you and creating a connection with them.
I love it. That's
Yeah.
fantastic advice.
Mm-hmm.
No, you nailed that one for sure.
Good.
Yeah. I was wondering too, when I wrote that question, Tim, I was just like, wonder what he's going to say. Because sometimes I can predict where I'm like, oh, it's probably talking going down this path or this one, but I was just like, but this is a tough one, because I know that one person mentioned to me that like he found a LinkedIn learning course on how to do this, how to get around it. And it was interesting. I was like, oh, okay, they're making LinkedIn courses now on how to get around this thing, but like their entire point of their website is all about of jobs, So it's just like, I don't know. I thought that was kind of strange.
And here's what I think. I just told somebody this the other week who was asking me about. They were getting hung up on trying to draft their resume in such a way that it would appeal to the ATS system, and this person's resume was so edited that she didn't recognize who it was describing anymore. And because you spend so much time trying to edit it to what they want it to say versus who you really are. And so here's my bit of advice about that is, if you're so obsessed about playing the game that you're editing a resume to, like I said, to describing somebody that you don't even recognize, well, then you're going to go into that job trying to maintain, in that interview and potentially that job, trying to maintain a facade that's not authentic, and you're probably going to fail. And so my advice is, yeah, there's a little bit of the game you have to play to get past the ATS system, but at the end of the day, you really need to be 100% authentic yourself. And if you get picked up and hired, then great. You got hired because of you, not because of this idea of a version of you that you created in your resume. And most hiring managers who know what they're doing when it comes to hiring and are really discerning in who they hire, they're not going through the ATS system. They're going through every resume to find the right person. And that I would rather work for that manager than the one who just hires the person who played the game the best. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Every time you read about something where you're seeing an application and it talks about something that's kind of negative, there's always a comment of like, oh, well, you dodged a bullet there because
Hmm.
you don't want to work for that organization, but you can already get this negative demeanor from the application itself. Like I saw even one today that talked about how they were basically excluding teachers
I
from
literally
that.
just saw that today.
Did
Yeah, I
you see
saw
the
that.
same thing? Yeah, where I was
And I'm
just
like,
like,
you
what
don't
do you
want
mean?
to, that's
Yeah,
horrible, but you don't want to work
yeah.
for that person. You don't want to work for that organization anyways. They showed you who they were. So great, you did dodge a bullet, you know?
100%, you definitely do not want to work there. So that's good. So let's move away from the negativity. Let's bring in the love. I want to hear, what is your favorite story when it comes to an instructional designer landing their dream job without a degree?
Oh, um, okay. Well, so not to, I don't want to take credit for this, but so when it's a personal story. So when I took over, when I got hired at GoDaddy as their director of instructional design, it was instructional design, but it was, at first I got hired specifically for e-learning, and then it became all instructional design later on. But when I got hired there, I took over this small team of folks who were not e-learning designers or instructional designers by any means. They used to be classroom trainers and then got promoted into this. And my job was to turn them into real grown-up instructional designers and e-learning designers. And there was one individual on the team. His name was Matt, and he still works there. And I'm still friends with him, and he's fantastic. And he had never ever touched an e-learning authoring tool before, or knew what instructional design was, or knew what storyline was. And I gave him all these tools, storyline and all these tools, and it just watching his eyes light up and watching him blossom into this tapped into this talent he never knew was there was so amazing. I mean, his first e-learning course, um, he built this really intricate branching scenario and used all these amazing graphics. And we ended up taking it to DevLearn, a conference that's held by the Learning Guild every year in Vegas. And he presented it at Demo Fest, which is like a science fair for e-learning courses. And he won an award. And I mean, it was his first e-learning course. And so that made me so proud, because I think it made me realize that, you know, we, all of us in this industry, we have the power to help people blossom in ways that they never even realized they could see in themselves. And that's super humbling and super powerful. And he's one of those people. I remember uh, he would, just like I described earlier, he would go home each night and play with these tools, all these tools he had access to, and he would do all sorts of crazy things that we never asked him to do. And I remember one time he showed at we every week we would do, or every month we would do, like a team demo of, a show and tell of everything we've been working on. And he did this really cool thing with this Adobe character animator that used body tracking and all sorts of cool stuff. And I remember my boss at the time, he called a meeting with me after Matt had demoed this thing. And he blew me up saying, why is Matt spending all this time doing these things? We're never going to use this. This isn't a good use of his time. This doesn't make good learning. And he should be spending his time elsewhere. And I told my boss at the time, I'm like, there is no way I'm going to tell this person to stop being passionate and exploring the boundaries of their capability and the tools. There are people on the team that I have to pull teeth to get them to open up this new tool that I gave them. Why would I tell him to stop? He is doing exactly what he should be doing. So yeah, that would be my story, I guess.
I love it. It's a real
Yeah,
story. It's
yeah.
just, and I want people to hear that. I want people to hear more real stories about how they do exist.
Hmm.
This is like one of the other days we had Christy Kittle come on the podcast, and she was a former teacher who is now actually a supervisor for instructional designers.
Hmm.
And it's like that. Like those stories exist,
Oh
but
yeah.
people often don't share them. So we need to find them and make sure that people actually hear about these, that they are real.
Yep.
We're not just making it up that you can just follow your dream. It's like, no, you can.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of hard work and dedication, and a bit of craziness, but
Yeah.
you can make things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It sure does.
It does. So where I love to leave everyone with is that I have been hearing more and more things about just folks trying to figure out like a direction of what they should do. Where should they learn more about things? And the thing is that you have like a million resources that people can check out. So tell the folks at home, whether your book, your academy, what can they do to just improve their instructional design skills from what you have?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I have my blog at elearningacademy.io. That's my main website with my blog. There's the eLearning Designer's Handbook, which is, I have a second edition of that, which I released about 6 months ago. That's on Amazon. That's a really practical guide to the e-learning development process for new e-learning designers. And then, of course, the two newest things is the actual eLearning Designers Academy. It's an online course program that I've created to guide anyone looking to grow their e-learning or instructional design careers, not just their skills, but also help them build their portfolios, learn how to use Storyline, build portfolio examples. That's at, again, elearningacademy.io. And then I just literally the earlier this week, one of the things I've been working on is a community component to it. So I launched a community platform that's 100% free. Anyone can join, and that's community.elearningacademy.io.
Awesome. Well, I was going to say, where can people learn more about you? But that definitely
That
covers it.
sums it up.
I was going to say, is there anywhere else that people should go to learn more about you on Twitter
They
or
could go
anything
to
else?
they can go to timslade.com, which is where my portfolio exists. I'm on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn. You just put in Tim Slade, you'll find me. So
Just Google the man. He's everywhere. He's doing everything. Amazing stuff. Tim, once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, folks, that was my awesome conversation with Tim. Be sure to follow him on every channel and subscribe to his YouTube channel. I have only heard positive things about all of Tim's work, so check out eLearning Designers Academy and his book over on Amazon. And of course, you can find all the links to Tim's social media accounts, channels, the book, everything else. They're all going to be down in the show notes below. If you are thinking about going down the instructional design degree road, by the way, I released a new YouTube video on my advice on what to do before applying for a degree program. It's practical advice on trying to find the right ID degree for you, so please watch this if you are thinking about going back to school. Don't be like the people who find out later on in their instructional design degree program, but actually you're not going to learn real life skills. They only cover theory. And just, those people, unfortunately, have wasted now time, energy, and thousands of dollars on a degree that might not actually help them. So please watch that video if you are really considering and thinking about going down this path. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, please give this podcast a 5-star rating. If you are listening on a podcast player, or if you are watching this on YouTube, be sure to like and comment and tell us what you liked about the episode. Every review, every comment, every share of all of this type of content, it really means a lot to me, to the guests, and it's just so awesome to see. And we definitely check out everything. So thank you in advance for all that you do. To learn more about my instructional design content, you can head on over to drlukehobson.com. That's all I have for you today, folks. Stay nerdy out there, and I'll talk to you next time.